Hey, it's Greg Otten here with MaritimeGardening.com. Overcast, sort of semi-rainy day here in late July, Nova Scotia. Today I thought I'd talk about kale, and specifically I wanted to address the question, how much kale is enough kale? I was talking to a coworker the other day, and she was I told her, I have 2 kale gardens that are about 4 by 10. I got kale in a couple other parts of my garden, but for the most part that's about how much kale I've gotten, and she was kind of blown away. So let me just talk around that a little bit. Generally speaking, I have found everyone in my family likes kale. We don't have smoothies and we don't have a lot of kale salad. When you buy that bag of kale salad, a lot of that's really young kale, and you can still make kale salad, but I just prefer to cook it because I find we eat a lot more that way. When you cook it wilts down, and you can just eat a lot, so you get more benefits from it. And I've got a lot, so I got to keep up with it. But so let's say we have a big mess of greens, just a way to cook greens with a meal every other day. Let's say 3 times a week, give or take. So to be able to do that for a family of 4, where everybody has a good helping of kale, I find that 2 4 by 10 beds of kale is about enough kale to do that. And how many plants is that? That's I don't know, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15. It's about 20 kale plants. 20 or 25, really depends on how tightly packed you have them and so on, but there's really no advantage to planting them too close. I find if they're spaced out in a 4 by 10 garden, basically in rows of 3 kale, and then you have about that much space, 16 inches, and then 3 more kale, and another 16-inch space, and 3 more kale. 2 hand spans, basically. 3 kale, 2 hand spans, 3 kale, 2 hand spans, and so on. So by this time of the year, and I don't always follow that rule. Some of my kale I've got 4 to a row, and some of them I got 5 to a row. There's no rule, but I do find you get sort of optimal results if it's 3 to a row. So around this time of the year, late July, I've got all the kale I can possibly handle. In fact, the garden's producing more than we can really keep up with, because we don't want to eat it every day. We got other things coming on the garden. We got peas, and pretty soon we're going to have beans. I got zucchini. So, one can only eat so much kale. So by this time of the year, we also have to start blanching it and putting it down. Almost about half the kale I'm harvesting this time of the year, I'm actually preserving it for the winter. And I find if you do it that way, you'll have enough kale to last you into late February, maybe even March, depending on how diligent you are. I mean, as your kale's growing, it gets layer after layer after layer, and the lower leaves, if you don't pick them, they're going to change color, lose their flavor, and eventually yellow. So you have to pick it anyway. You have to constantly pick it to stimulate new growth and to remove the stuff beneath. So if you're not harvesting that other kale, all you're doing is feeding the slugs and snails, which you don't want to do. So you have to harvest it anyway. So in this video I'm just going to show a little bit of that harvesting technique. It's just the cut and come again technique. I've done lots of videos on that, just for those that are interested. And then I'm going to do another video a bit later on where I cook the kale, show you how I like to cook it. And I'm also going to do a video to show how I preserve it, how I blanch and freeze it, a technique I use. So come along. Well, I hope the weather is starting to rain a bit more here. I hope the weather cooperates. But this kale garden was an utter bed of weeds a couple weeks ago. And I weeded it and mulched it, and now it's just bountiful, right? And this is just a beautiful kale garden. This is the red Russian kale or Siberian kale, that general variety. That's my favorite kind of kale to grow. It grows really well here where I am. And I like the flavor of it cooked. It's not much of a salad kale. You'd have to wilt it down a bit. You'd have to blanch it a bit to get a salad out of it. I had to pause the camera and put an umbrella over it because it's weather's just gone totally sideways on me here. Anyway, I garden in the rain all the time. When it's warm, I prefer that because it's nice and cool. Anyway, so let me show you what I mean by harvesting the lower leaves. And for people that grow a lot of kale, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's, you know, I got a big kale plant here, doing really well. And all the leaves on it look pretty good. So the leaves on the outside, the very outside, they're the ones that gotta go. And you just sort of put your thumb on them and turn sideways a bit, like that. You don't need a knife or scissors or anything in particular, right? That's all you do. You're getting all those ones on the outside, because they're the ones that are gonna go first. And while you're harvesting, you really want to focus on the leaves that are going into the other plants, right? You really don't want them touching each other. They'll just mess each other up and block the sunlight to each other. So I tend to go a little heavier on the side that's adjacent to another plant. I should have brought a bigger bowl. You notice these two plants are a bit different. This one here has a white stem, and this one here has a red stem. I don't really understand why the variation, but people call this one Siberian kale, and people call this one red Russian kale. I really don't think there's any difference in flavor at all. Who knows? Alright, so that's pretty good. You just sort of examine the plant and see what needs moving away. And all you're doing is allowing, oh, there's a leaf that's a bit bent. So it probably doesn't have much of a future. I'm going to remove that one too. See how it was bent like that? It's almost like you're pruning. Right, now here's a lacinato kale. Is that on the camera? This is called Black Magic. Seeds provided by Vessi Seeds. So here's a lower one. That's kind of lost a little bit, right? It should have been picked a couple days ago, or maybe even a week ago. Still edible, all right, but there's no point in leaving that on the plant. It's been worked over pretty hard by the various pests. And just, you know, for those that follow up, I do use an organic sort of pesticide provided by Safer's Gardening Products. But I really haven't needed much this year. This year's been really well. I haven't sprayed or applied anything on this garden for, close to a month now. So I haven't even really seen, I usually have a really big problem with cabbage moths around here. And I haven't really seen any, I haven't seen hide nor hair of them this year. I saw one actually during one of my videos earlier this year, but I haven't really seen them since. They just, I don't know if it's because I treated them in a previous year and they just, I just knocked the population back. I really don't know, but I mean, normally a garden like this full of kale would have those things all over it. Every plant would have them, and I would have to treat it with BTK. But this year, no, doesn't seem to be a non-issue. I know people are going to chime in and say, why don't you just pick them off one by one? When you have this much kale, that's insane. It would be a full-time job picking the pests off this much kale one by one. People that suggest that really don't grow a lot of kale. I just don't see how you could possibly keep up. And because I know I'm going to get the comments, all those things, a ring of copper, diatomaceous earth, eggshells, all that stuff. I have found none of that stuff to deter slugs in my garden. So, but anyway, this year I don't seem to have any problem at all. I had a little bit of issue with that sort of thing earlier on in the year, and now there's a snail right there. Right, and this garden's got all kinds of snails in it. But when the plants are nice and big and healthy like this, just like lots of permaculture gardeners say, it really doesn't pose a problem. I don't really understand it, but look, there's two slugs right there. Look at that. I didn't mean to do a slug video here, but there's two slugs, but they're actually they're eating this rotten piece of plant material. They're not eating the live stuff, they're eating this dead rotten stuff, which is fine by me. So I mean, these can be a real problem when you're trying to get your seedlings going. but you just knock them back with a little bit of that safer slug bait stuff. It's just iron something, and still lots of slugs kicking around, but and snails. I have a lot of these in my garden, but they don't seem to, you know, I mean, look at these kale plants. They look great. Beautiful kale garden. There's tons of slugs in there, snails, and they seem to just be getting along fine. I think once the plants are big and healthy and mature, they can take it. The stems get really tough, and I don't think the slugs really explore much further than that. I don't know. I can't really explain it. All I know is it works. Here's a good example. So here's a stem from one of my kale, and you can see there's a snail on there. But you can tell that this doesn't look as nice and healthy as this other one. Right? One here is nice and green and healthy, and this one's sort of faded. And I find the pests like these lousy faded ones, the kind that don't taste good to us. For some reason they prefer this, and they don't like the nice lush green ones. Doesn't make any sense to me, but all the more reason to not let the lower branches get to this state, because all you're doing is feeding these guys. Anywho, just worked my way along here. Another thing I like to do is shuck them when I'm out in the garden, just like this. You can still use the stems. They're good for soups and stuff like that. I mean, you can fry them up and cook them up and eat them and all that sort of stuff. They're perfectly edible. But when you're trying to fit all the stuff into a bowl, it just fits better if you keep the greens, right? What I do is I chop these all up and just put them in bags and use them in soups. Because when you're cooking kale greens, this is the best part. So why not just enjoy the best part as it is and throw this in a soup somewhere? That's my opinion on the matter anyway. Yes, the stems are fine and they're nutritious and they're good for you and there's nothing wrong with them. Yes, I agree. But the leaf part's better. That's the best part. Sorry. Not telling anybody what to do, I'm just showing you what I do. It's also easier to shuck the leaves when you're out in your garden, right? It's just you got more space, you got more room. It's just easier. And the size of these leaves, man, they're huge. So once you get going, you can get pretty quick at it. Show a little bit more about that whole shucking thing. You're just going like that, you know, and if you want to get oh, there's a bit of sign of damage there. If you want to get fancy, you can you pull, and then, you know, the stem off the very end part is the more tender part of the stem, so, you know, you don't need to shuck the whole stem. Again, you don't have to do this. I just find, you know, this is the most, there's a slug in there. This is the most tender part, so, you know, that's the more enjoyable part to eat, and it requires the least amount of cooking, so you can cook it up really fast. And all these stems, you can relegate them to soups, or if you're going to make some sort of like a bean dish or a corn dish or whatever, something where you've got a bunch of sort of smaller things all cut up, you could throw the stems in there. Like a dish that you throw frozen peas into. You just cut the stems up in pieces that are that size, and use them instead of a frozen pea. Though, you know, they'll cook up in about, oh, I don't know, if you're sauteing them, maybe 10 minutes for a stem, whereas this part only takes a couple minutes. Again, I'll do some videos on this, some cooking videos. I know the cooking videos aren't as popular as the garden videos, but some people like them, so keep doing them. There. See how that all just fits nicely in the container, right? Now I can bring them inside without, you know, having them fall all over the place. And then I got all these stems that I can use for different things too. I've tried, hello, blue jay over there. I've tried lacto-fermenting the stems, and you can do it, but I just didn't like the way they tasted. That's all. It's just that simple. I didn't enjoy them. So I find they're better, you know, cut up and cooked as a kind of cooked green. And you can cook them with the other greens. They take longer to cook, so you have to time everything. I find it's better to sort of cook them separately because they just take a bit longer. You know, when I cook greens, I have some garlic and some oil, and I get that going. And if I'm going to use the stems, I put the stems in with the garlic, and you know, I'll give them a good, I don't know, 6 minutes as a saute, right? Moving them around a bit with a bit of salt. And then you add the greens for about 3 minutes, right? Because these just take longer to cook, so I like to just shuck them off right off the bat. Anyway, just a short video about kale, how much I think you need to grow if you've got a family of, I'm just using my own situation as an example of family of 4 and everybody likes kale, you know, and that really depends on how often and how frequent you eat it, right? So we have a nice big, you know, bowl of cooked kale at least 3 times a week, maybe even more. Maybe 4, yeah, 3 or 4 times a week. Well, kale is like a major part of the meal. So that's what we do, and if you've got 2 4x10 gardens, that should be enough to provide you for the entire gardening season all the way to December, and also to provide you, you know, frozen blanched kale going deep into the winter. I've picked 2 good-sized bowls of kale, and I'm not done. I got to go back and get some more bowls and pick some more, because a good deal of the kale here just has to be picked, or it's going to go all nasty like that leaf with the snail on it that I showed you, which that's just waste, right? I put all that energy into getting it going, and I want to get everything out of it. I don't want to give anything to the slugs, right? It's all going to me. That's the deal I want. So I got a lot of work today. So we're not going to eat all of this, right? I mean, yeah, I could put it all in the fridge, and we could eat it the next day and the next day, but in 2 days there'll be more kale I got to pull out of here. Every 2 or 3 days I got to pull more kale. I mean, we're eating kale every two days, give or take, because I got to pull kale out of here every 2 days. I'm just keeping up with it. And I haven't picked kale for about 3 days right now, so I got an overabundance, so I got to take a good portion of this and put it down for the winter. And you just stay on top of it starting around now. I find I've got more kale than I can handle, and I don't want to go door to door begging my neighbors to take it off my hands. I just put it in my freezer, and it's very easy to do. I'll do a video on how to blanch that. So I hope you found that useful and gave you some good ideas, and if it did, please like, share, subscribe, check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. Until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.